My name is Diane, and I'm 41 years old. 3 months after burying my husband, I sat in a lawyer's office wearing the same black dress I'd worn to his funeral because I couldn't bring myself to buy anything new. I was still learning how to breathe in a room he wasn't in. Still waking up at 3 a.m. reaching for a hand that wasn't there. I wasn't prepared for what happened next. But I should have been. Because grief has a way of making you forget that not everyone in the room is mourning the same person you are. Marcus and I were married for 14 years. We met when I was 26, when he was a quiet, methodical man who kept spreadsheets for fun and apologized to furniture he bumped into. He made me laugh every single day. He also made me feel, for the first time in my adult life, genuinely safe. He passed in January. A cardiac event, sudden, no warning. One morning, he was standing in the kitchen making coffee. By afternoon, he was gone. I won't describe those first weeks. Some things don't belong in language. What I will tell you is that his parents, Gerald and Patrice, showed up to the house 4 days after the funeral asking about the will. Not asking how I was doing. Not bringing food. Not sitting with me in the silence the way people do when they truly understand loss. They asked about the will. Gerald was never warm toward me. In 14 years, I could count the real conversations we'd had on one hand. Patrice was more careful, polite in the way that keeps a door closed without ever slamming it. They'd always treated me like a temporary arrangement Marcus had made, something they'd tolerated but never accepted. I remember standing at Marcus's father's 60th birthday dinner, years earlier, watching the family take a photograph. Someone arranged everyone by height, by age, by bloodline, and I ended up at the edge of the frame. Not quite asked to step out. Just never quite pulled in. Marcus had noticed. He always noticed. He squeezed my hand under the table that night and said something quietly that I still carry with me. You are my family. Everything else is just background noise. I didn't understand, then, exactly what he meant by everything else. The will reading was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. Gerald and Patrice arrived before I did. When I walked in, they were already seated, already talking to each other in low voices that stopped the moment the door opened. The lawyer, a composed man named Robert Chin, welcomed us and began the standard process. Marcus had been organized in life, and he was organized in death. There were accounts, property, some investments, a vehicle, sentimental items designated for specific people. Everything went to me. As his spouse, as his partner, as the person who had spent 14 years building a life alongside him, Marcus had made his intentions very clear. Gerald's jaw tightened with every line Robert read. Patrice folded her hands in her lap like she was physically holding herself together. And then, before Robert could finish, Gerald leaned forward in his chair and said it. That money belongs to the family. Our son worked his entire career to build that. His brother's wedding is in 4 months. We've already made commitments we can't afford. Marcus would have wanted to support his brother. The room went quiet. Not the heavy grief quiet I'd been living in for 3 months. A different kind of quiet. Brittle. Charged. I looked at him. Then at Patrice, who didn't correct him. Then back at Robert, who had gone very still behind his desk. I said nothing. I had learned, over many years of being underestimated, that silence is sometimes the most powerful sentence in the room. Patrice added, more softly, Diane, we're not saying you get nothing. We're just saying Marcus would have wanted to take care of his family. There it was. The implication folded inside the kindness. The suggestion that I wasn't his family. That I was something adjacent to it. Something temporary. Something that could be graciously offered a portion while the real family took what it was owed. I had been awake since 4 a.m. I had not eaten breakfast. I was wearing a dress that still smelled faintly of the church from 3 months ago. And I was done being arranged to the edge of the frame. I looked at Robert. He looked back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read in that moment, steady, composed, with the faintest suggestion of something held in reserve. He said, before we conclude, I want to note that Mr. Holloway left specific instructions for this meeting. There is a second document. Gerald frowned. A second document? Robert opened his briefcase. He removed an envelope, cream-colored, sealed, and placed it on the desk between us. Mr. Holloway prepared this approximately 8 months ago. He asked that it be read in the event that any party contested or verbally challenged the terms of the primary while during this meeting. The silence that followed had a texture to it. Gerald's certainty, so solid 2 minutes earlier, developed a hairline crack. Robert opened the envelope and began to read. Marcus had written it himself. I recognized the cadence of his sentences, careful, precise, unambiguous. He'd always said that clarity was a form of kindness. The letter acknowledged, by name, that his parents might challenge the will. He wrote that he had anticipated this not out of bitterness, but out of knowing the people he loved. He wrote that in the final year of his life, he had become aware of a pattern: financial requests made through suggestion, through guilt, through implication, and that he had chosen to protect his wife from that pattern continuing after he was gone. He noted, specifically, his brother's wedding, which had been discussed with him multiple times as a financial expectation. He had declined, privately, without fanfare, and he had documented it. The letter also referenced a separate trust structure Robert had administered, funds designated exclusively for me, outside of the primary estate, unreachable by any legal contest his family might attempt. Robert set the letter down. Gerald's face had moved through several expressions. It landed somewhere between embarrassment and fury, which, I've learned, is the place people go when they've been caught behaving badly in front of a witness. Patrice was looking at the wall. I didn't feel triumph in that moment. I want to be honest about that. Because Marcus had written that letter while he was alive and healthy 8 months ago, which meant he had sat at a desk, in our house, thinking carefully about what he needed to protect me from after he died. That thought is not a victory. It is a kind of sadness I am still learning to hold. He knew. He planned. He loved me with the kind of love that keeps working even after it's gone. Gerald said something about intentions, about family, about how this was all a misunderstanding. His voice had lost its authority. He sounded like a man trying to retract something he'd already handed over. I gathered my things. I told Robert the first would follow up about the administrative next steps. I thanked him for his thoroughness. And I walked out of that office into February air, cold, gray, ordinary, and I stood on the sidewalk for a moment just breathing. I haven't spoken to Gerald or Patrice since that Tuesday. I don't say that with anger. I say it the way you describe a door that quietly closed and found its lock. Marcus's brother got married in May. I was not invited, which was fine. I sent nothing, which was also fine. What I kept was the letter. I've read it many times. Not because it helps with the grief, nothing accelerates that, but because it reminds me that someone saw me clearly. That someone thought carefully about who I was, what I deserved, and what I might need on the other side of an ordinary morning that became the worst day of my life. People ask me sometimes how I stayed so calm in that lawyer's office. How I didn't say something when Gerald made his demand. How I sat there without falling apart. I think the honest answer is that I already knew, somewhere deep and quiet, that Marcus had not left me unprotected. I didn't know about the second envelope. But I knew him. And the people who spent 14 years treating me like background noise never quite understood that the quietest person in the room is sometimes the one who has already won. If you've ever been treated like you don't belong in your own life, dismissed, underestimated, arranged to the edge of the frame, stay with this channel. Subscribe now. Because real stories about dignity, truth, and the people who plan ahead with love are told here every week.